The first time I laid eyes on Karn Varek, I was taken aback. I was accustomed to normal humans, who were large but not exceptionally so. Yet Thor stood nearly 7 feet tall, a veritable giant even by human standards. As he strode up the ramp to our research vessel, the very structure trembled beneath his immense weight. Clad in casual attire rather than power armor, he still weighed over 400 pounds in Earth's gravity. The pack he carried seemed large enough to accommodate our entire crew. Despite his imposing stature, Thor's expression was one of warmth, his long, braided beard parting to reveal a smile as he ascended the ramp in just a few long strides, ducking slightly to pass through the exterior doorway. The pilot glanced up, feeling the ship's tremors as Thor moved through it. "What's that?" he asked. "Our newest crew member," I murmured in response. I proceeded to review Thor's profile, which revealed him to be a xenobiologist with degrees from 3 separate human universities and 5 research projects at various top institutes of learning. He was renowned as an expert on Deathworld creatures and their flora, claiming that the latter improved his understanding of the former. Yet he had only entered university at the age of 31. What had he done before then? Thumbing through his dossier, I discovered that Thor had been a member of the Terran Alliance Sea, Air, Land, and Space Unit, a legacy organization inherited from the United States of America. They were now primarily deployed to eliminate swarm queens, but their services could be procured. I closed the datapad with a sense of unease. A soldier among scholars. What had Virax Colthrin been thinking in assigning this monstrosity to us? As Thor stepped onto the bridge, his imposing presence was even more palpable. His legs strained against the fabric of his pants, his arms thick as tree trunks emerging from his polo shirt. His hands resembled the great hams we consume during the festival of our fathers. I reached out and shook his hand. "Karn Varek, I presume?" "Yes, sir. And you are?" "Dr. Nirvana Solaris." "Oh, Dr. Tankoff, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you in person, and I am so excited to finally get to work with a person with your great stature within the academic community. Your paper on Oriamnos americanus is what got me into biology in the first place." I smiled and nodded. Of course he is a fan, probably fawning to gain our trust. "Well, sir, I hope that our trip will be as productive as mine to the Chugach and Wrangell Mountains was. I am sure it will be. A pristine planet, a Class 20, a rare gem for Deathworld biologists like ourselves. I am concerned that you may not be prepared for this trip. Earth is in 18, this planet is considerably worse. I will learn anything you need me to, but please keep in mind that I fought the swarm in the Darkness Brush. And Darkness is a Class 23 planet. We had no backup for 27 Earth days, had to find food to eat, water to drink on our own. And to top it all off, we had sentient beings trying to hunt us down. Trust me when I say that I will not be a nuisance to your team." "Quite." I remained unconvinced. Darkness had been an inhospitable, unforgiving place that I had visited after the humans had destroyed the hive there. It seemed implausible that he could have survived as he claimed in the brush, as the humans referred to it. I dismissed him and continued with my work, prepping for our departure. Another human that I had worked with quite closely was on his way. He was the engineer that kept the Discovery flying, but he was a small, unimposing man. My PID pinged and I picked it up. Good. Marshall was on his way. I finished my report, then sent a notice to the organizer of this expedition that I did not approve of Thor, but would take him along. I stopped, then evaluated what I had said. Had I really been aggressive towards a being who could rip me limb from limb? Yet this individual, regardless of his past, was a respected scholar who shared my academic interests. "Sir, we have an issue. Our newest crew member won't fit into the bunks." "Naturally, please inform Marshall when he arrives. I'm confident he can devise a solution." I paused. "Yarrow, did I come across as hostile towards Mr. Stein?" "Yes, sir, you were a bit of an asshole." I sighed. Tyrians were always so frank. They always called it like they saw it. I guess I needed to make amends with our newest crew member. I made my way down to the crew area and found that Thor had already made himself a bed. He had taken a chair and placed it at the end of his bed so that he could prop his legs on it when he slept. He was in the process of stowing his things when I walked about the corner. He looked at me as I rounded the corner, watched me for a moment, then continued with what he was doing. "I apologize. I was not expecting you so soon. would you like a tour of the ship? Yes, sir. I would love to see the facilities we have available. I turned and Thor closed his box and placed it back under his bunk, then quickly made of the distance with his massively long legs. I will be frank, sir. Your presence is. I dropped off. I didn't want to call this man out for what he was. Intimidating? He grinned back. God, his teeth were huge. Yes, very much so. You seem to be a nice person, but scholars and warriors don't always see eye to eye. I'm aware. I had to contend with that even in human institutions. Thor glanced at the doctor. Figuratively, of course. I'm sorry, it's just that you are the first human soldier that any of this crew have ever met. You are almost as tall as they make all human soldiers out to be, and you come from an elite fighting unit. You are an object of myth and legend, even though you might not know it, the prowess of which your military fights is exceptional, and at times, very frightening. I suspected as much, given the frequent glances around the station and the chilly welcome I received on the bridge. I realize you may be hesitant to embrace someone known as a destroyer among you. And so we began our tour of the ship, I said. The Discovery was not a small vessel containing 20 labs, one for each researcher. It was centered around a Tyrrek-made but human-upgraded fusion core that output 7.4 terawatts. Combined with the drive core donated by Boeing from their factory on Mercury, this ship could go from a cold start to near light speed in 45 seconds, or even faster if the core didn't need to be cold-started. The ship's power and capabilities were impressive, able to easily adjust the orbits of small bodies with its gravitics. As we reached the end of the tour in the spacious cargo bay, I was filled with curiosity, having never seen a human with such a perfect physical form. I have a question for you. As a scientist of Deathworld species, I began. Shoot, he replied, gesturing for me to continue. Humanity seems unique in one regard besides their apparent durability, the ability to throw projectiles at high velocities with minimal effort. I'm curious to see this in action. Most of us can't throw very well? He asked. No, we lack that capability. We rely more on accurate projectile weapons, such as plasma or lasers, due to their quicker transition to the target. All right, let me find something to demonstrate. He cupped his hands, estimating the size and weight. I played baseball in high school, outfield. I could throw one of these from the back of the outfield to home plate. Let's see if I still have it. I inputted some data into my pad, and within moments the fabricators produced a regulation baseball. A droid brought it to us. Is that thing sentient or important? Thor inquired. No, it's merely a repair and made bot. It follows simple protocols, and we'll build several more before our journey's end. We use them for sample collection as well, I replied. He nodded. Very well, have it move to the far end of the bay, then adjust the gravity to 9.8 meters per second squared. I dialed in the gravity and waited. He gently tossed the ball up, and as it descended, he moved into action. A half hop, then he planted his rear foot, and as his forward foot came down, he caught the ball and threw his entire body into the motion. 401 pounds of bone, dense muscle, and thrumming nervous system, all pushed forward with one goal, sending that ball to its home. He pulled his left hand back and pushed with his shoulder, adding titanic might to the tiny ball. His hips turned, and the little sphere left his hand. The entire motion happened in fractions of a second, but I spent hours watching that whip-like action transform the small ball into a rapid-moving projectile that could fell almost any being not wearing battle armor. As the ball flew the length of the cargo hold, just over 2 seconds of flight time for 259 feet, I thought it might miss, but it curved back inward and slammed into the droid with more energy than my species' primitive range weapons could ever deliver. The results were catastrophic for the droid. The baseball blew through the plastic outer cover and destroyed the bank of electronics inside without seeming to do any damage to itself. I stood in shock. If this was what they could do in a mere game, what were they capable of when fighting or under the effects of adrenaline? I stood on the bridge as Yarrell took us out of the spaceport. The Discovery pulled away from the station, made a flyby of the command arm, then rolled, banked, and headed for a jump lane. Yarrell mapped our jumps through P-space, then sat back as the computer took control. Our Alcubierre drive warmed up in just 13 seconds, an astonishingly rapid pace compared to the 5 minutes required by the previous research vessel I had been aboard. Space and time warped around us, and then the gravitics kicked in, opening a tiny seam in the fabric of space-time. A hole appeared, and the Discovery flitted through. She was a 5-layered ship, meaning she could pass through 5 layers up in the pyramid of space, each adding an order of magnitude to her speed. Utilizing the Cub drive, as Marshall had named it, we now traveled at nearly 1,000 times the speed of light. Even so, it would still take us 18 days to reach our destination. Yarrow was one of the finest pilots ever born. I left him to tend to the ship while I went to get some rest. As I walked through the mess, I came across Marshall and Thor. They were engaged in a game of chess, eating and drinking. Apparently, I looked confused. "It's chess, Tank," Marshall said. "Tank?" Thor asked. "That's what I call him. Tank." "I'm not good with names," Marshall replied, a grin spreading across Thor's slightly flushed face. On one side stood Marshall, short, slight of build, slightly balding, wearing glasses and appearing to suffer from a lack of sustenance. Yet behind those massive lenses lay an exceptional mechanical mind. He had never earned a degree, but at age 12 he was handed a wrench and tasked with repairing a fusion core. And now, nearly 50 years later, he was one of the most respected fusion core engineers, or mechanics, in the known universe. On the other hand, there was Thor, a hulking behemoth who had been trained to eliminate any threat. His foray into biology had likely made him even more formidable, and yet he had brought understanding to many parts of the galaxy that few had dared to explore. He had lived among the rock hounds of Therius Tor and studied 10 different species on a planet known as Agua to humans, renowned for his ability to identify patterns within planets and list what one might find on a world untouched by sentient life. In addition to his rigorous academic record, he had saved millions of lives not through violence, but by generously sharing his discoveries that could have been profitable, donating them to the Council and any species that desired them. "Blood tends to attract more blood," Marshall remarked with a slight smirk. "To be considered a true Viking, one must meet certain criteria," he stated. "Well, you aren't wrong," Marshall said. "I would like some clarification. I did some research last night, and many people, mainly in the military world, call you the Viking. What is that from?" "To be a true Viking, you have to be a few things." He took a large drink from his tankard, which was the size of my head. "The first is you need to be Scandinavian. I didn't get that from my dad. He was a Texan, through and through. But my mother? Aye, she was Scandinavian to the bone. Might have heard of her, Serafina Ironforge. The Hillevi Jogensen? The mighty northern wind? Aye, that's her, the woman who commands the Drake, the woman who won the hearts and minds of the entire 701st Scandinavian Division, the woman who held off 8 hive devastators with nothing more than her heavy destroyer and the guile and testicular fortitude of 18 men. That's me, Mammy." It was no surprise that this man was as he was. His mother was the North Wind, a woman legendary throughout the galaxy. She was Rear Admiral Serafina Ironforge, leader of Jorgensen's Wolves, an elite unit of fast, hard-hitting light craft whose sole purpose was to hunt pirates in this day and age. When humanity goes into full war mode, they are given free rein. They will go behind enemy lines and destroy the supply chain. They are said to be the direct descendants of the Vikings that once plied the North Sea. As terrifying as a human dreadnought dropping in system is, witnessing the Wolfpack's arrival is even more terrifying. I am Tyvek Kothlar, son of the Lance of the Homeworld. I have retired from active duty in the 7th Ace Division with a blue security clearance and personal identification number 858D389226. Karn Varric is the most recent addition to the crew of the research vessel, the Discovery. He is one of the most intelligent beings I have ever encountered, surpassing even our ship's mechanic, Jackson Maddox, in intellectual capacity. Varric stands at 2 meters and 8 centimeters tall, weighing approximately 189 kilograms. Despite his human physiology, which is known to carry more body fat, he does not exhibit an excessive amount. His endurance is remarkable, as I have observed him running with a 45-kilogram pack for 6.5 kilometers. every 24 hours, often increasing the gravity in the workout room to 2 to 3 times the standard level without apparent fatigue. Varek's martial arts routine is equally impressive. He moves through the forms with deliberate slowness, suggesting a high level of mastery, and will sometimes restart the sequence if he detects even the slightest imperfection in his execution. Just because he knows a martial art doesn't make him the mightiest. A well-placed plasma bolt could stop him in his tracks. I had a conversation with him, and he was trained as a human sniper, but never deployed in that role. So if he's telling the truth, he must be an exceptional marksman. Exactly. And then there was the time we sparred. What do you mean by that? We had a practice fight session. I know I'm highly skilled in the assassin's art, and after talking with him, I decided I wanted to test my abilities against one of Earth's finest. That was incredibly risky. Perhaps, but I needed to know. Know what? As the ship's security expert, it was my responsibility to be able to stop anyone if necessary, and I could stop anyone before, using my knowledge of their anatomy to subdue them with just a few blows. And now, well, I can't use force against Thor. I'd have to go straight to lethal measures. Our sparring session began, and I started with the lowest techniques, gradually escalating. Even at the end, when I was unleashing flurries of blows that would overwhelm most opponents, he was easily keeping up. There were certain moves I couldn't physically execute against him. Everything you have described about this human does not deviate from the standard set for their kind. It is one thing to read about such capabilities, but quite another to witness a human lift nearly twice their own substantial body weight, repeatedly, or move with such speed that their movements blur. Similarly, while seeing a human's fury on video may be unsettling, seeing one strike a Kraldinaran hard enough to hospitalize it, then seize and crush the hand of its companion, is a truly daunting sight. When this human turned their gaze upon me afterward, I was overcome by a sensation I had not experienced since my time in the hive and my trials with the bugs, fear and a sense of utter powerlessness in their presence. He is confident that his reflexes surpass any law enforcement's. He is always prepared. Indeed, the weapon functions flawlessly, just as it did when Thor's father first gave it to him. He obtains ammunition directly from Earth, and it is apparently a rare collector's item worth a fortune, yet he carries it as his personal armament. I christen this world Kragoth, which roughly translates to storm in our tongue. So this place was named for its stormy weather? I inquired. Indeed, sir. A more fitting name than many planets receive. Having observed so many, I suspected this one may have simply retained a numeric designation. It can and will overwhelm the unprepared without remorse. I proceeded with the research plan for this planet. The atmosphere should be breathable for most of the scientists, and this planet was small. It was roughly the size of Earth's moon, though its gravity was almost equal to that of Earth at sea level. It was a highly mountainous world, with much of the sea crashing against cliffs. Storms constantly battered the mountainous terrain. The seaward land was stripped bare by the near-constant blasting winds, but the leeward side varied from mountainous rainforest near the equator to taiga towards the poles. Reviewing the probe data, I determined this planet's fauna and flora would be on par with Earth's, though the powerful storms that ravaged the landscape elevated it 2 tiers in scale. A full scan revealed no volcanic activity, which was odd. The probe had been destroyed by a massive heat burst, registering thermal overload for 0.2 of a second before losing connection, perhaps due to a lightning strike while on the surface. I began cataloging the specimens. There were 6-legged creatures similar to the first I had studied on Earth. Packs of carnivores roamed, and several diseases were present, though less common due to the higher altitudes. However, a type of fungus seemed to help plants grow with improved cell walls. It was impressive how the heavy-gravity species adapted to their crushing environment. Permission to lead a crew planetside for collection and observation of local life forms. Thor had entered my laboratory, already outfitted for a landing. A carbon nanotube undergarment was covered by a set of human SBDUs with a camouflage pattern. Granted, I must ask, why the military attire? These are old combat fatigues. They're comfortable, provide thermal regulation, and help conceal me when observing animal behavior patterns. I considered his words. Would the other researchers benefit from such attire? Most rely on stealth suits, but I prefer not to, as I'm unsure of the animal's capabilities. I once encountered a species of bird that could sense electronics, with a predator using electricity to stun its prey. So you opt for more traditional methods of concealment? Yes, sir. I shook my head. I conducted the majority of my research using drones, finding it faster and more efficient. I never understood the commune with nature approach. I had hoped Thor's military background would make him as efficient as possible, but it seems I expected too much. Approximately 6 hours later, "Sir, we have a situation." Yarrow's voice came over the intercom. "I'm headed to the bridge now." I washed my hands and hurried to the bridge. As I stepped aboard, the comm console lit up. "Doctor, come in." Thor's audio echoed through the speakers. "I can hear you, Thor. What's happening?" A thunderous roar drowned him out for a moment. "Rild is dead." "What killed him?" It sounded like Thor was running. Unsure, I heard his screams. Then, oh shit. I heard a pop, likely from Thor's weapon. "Thor, what is happening?" Another roar. I thought I could hear him trying to speak. "Evacuating the planet until we can gather more information." "Yarrow, what is the status of the shuttle?" "The shuttle's engines are warmed up, and everyone except Thor, Rild, and the Ilindani are aboard." "Thor, is the Ilindani with you?" "Yes, I'm carrying him. He couldn't keep up with me, and I can barely outpace it. My scientific instincts wanted to know if the mighty Viking could take it on, but I didn't want a fleet of human warships showing up to investigate the death of the only human researcher aboard this vessel. They were nearing the vessel when I finally got video from the vessel. The Ilindani was draped over Thor's shoulder, and Thor was running fast. My instincts tried to kick in when I saw what was, to me, an apex predator looking terrified and running fast. He ran with his research pack on his back, a pistol in one hand, and steadied the researcher over his shoulder with the other. Something was coming out of the timberline behind them, but I couldn't quite make it out with the giant scientist in the way. "Do we have another camera?" "Not on that side of the ship. This one is mainly for a documentary of the mission," Yarrow said. "Okay." And at that moment, a giant plume of flame grew behind them, rushing their way. Thor looked over his shoulder as he skidded to a stop. He dropped his load, then pushed a button on his info pad as he dropped over the alien. I noticed that Thor was very careful not to crush the researcher. The flame rushed over them just as he landed. Our video feed went dead. Silence filled the bridge. This was very bad. I scrambled to my lab. We needed to know what was happening, and the only eyes I could provide would be the drones I use for research. I reached my lab and promptly ordered all drones to the shuttle site. The first one would be there in 27 seconds. "Sir, whatever it was that was attacking Thor, it's attacking the shuttle now. Engine 1 just was ripped from its mounts." I wasn't one to curse, but shit. Whatever this was, it was tearing apart a vessel designed to survive micrometeoroid impacts, unpowered re-entry, and a myriad of other things. I paced back and forth in my lab. Then the drone arrived. I believed I had braced myself for the worst, but I was utterly unprepared for the sight that unfolded before me. A massive, scaled beast had coiled itself around the shuttle, attempting to tear it apart with its teeth and claws. Glowing lines ran along its teeth, and it shook the shuttle violently with its relentless attacks. The shuttle was striving to lift off, but the beast's weight, combined with the damage to the propulsion system, kept it grounded. I guided the drone closer, and the beast looked up at me. Its neck expanded as it drew in air. Then a sudden burst of flame rushed over the drone, frying its electronic systems. I quickly moved to the next drone, 17 seconds out, approaching from the north. As I began to grasp the situation, I caught a glimpse of something flying through the air and striking the giant scaled lizard on the head. It bounced off, having no effect. I knew the source. Thor had thrown a rock at the beast, trying to divert its attention. "Run, you foolish fool," I murmured. The lizard-like creature turned, its gaze settling on Thor. It did not perceive him as a threat. I finally drew close enough to pick up audio. Thor grabbed another rock and hurled it, the projectile bouncing off the formidable animal. "Yeah, I'm talking to you, you dimwit!" The beast snarled and slithered off the shuttle, its forelegs propelling it rapidly as it touched down. The shuttle landed, and someone dragged Ilandani's unconscious form onto it, the craft then racing into the sky. I noticed that the dragon below had no wings. Given its immense size, the dragon below likely lacked the ability to take flight. My computer program had the creature pegged at 24 meters long, and a rough estimate on the mass being over 6,000 kilograms. Something that big would be even more terrifying if it could take to the air. I counted our blessings. The ground rumbled under each step, enormous claws tearing the ground up beneath them. Thor looked completely calm, not complacent, like someone who was waiting on death to welcome them, but rather like my brother did when he had a card up his sleeve. A sensor went off, but I ignored it. My eyes were glued to the monitor. Sweat beaded on my palms, and my heart raced. The dragon kept its steady pace forward, only 10 meters away by now. It rose its head up with its serpentine neck, and the neck expanded as air was taken in. I watched as a spark jumped across the creature's mouth, and flame poured out like a massive torch. Thor knelt down as a silver shield seemed to grow out of the ground. He took up the handle with one hand as the flames washed around the shield, burning the plants around him and torching the dirt. He stood and the beast looked confused. This creature had survived without running away. It took a tentative step forward, and Thor reached down to his pack that was now on the ground and retrieved his hatchet. Thor's hair covered his face from my second drone as he looked down, but when he looked up, a smile unlike any other I had seen was plastered on his face. Thor surged forward. The dragon stepped backward a few steps, but Thor covered the ground, separating them faster than I believed possible. It swiped at him, and he froze his forward momentum. The massive talons swept by in front of him, and he charged forward again, this time hatchet raised. He swung with the titanic might of someone whose ancestors developed on a heavy gravity planet. The hatchet lunged forward, only to bounce off the dragon's thick scales. The dragon tried to sweep at him again, but missed. Then Jarl made his appearance. He dropped out of his shuttle, which flew away without him, armed with naught but a shield and sword. "Jarl, what are you doing?" he called out. "It is not noble to challenge a mindless beast with advanced weapons," Jarl replied. "This isn't a matter of honor, it's a matter of life," I cried into the microphone. "Life holds no value without honor," he said, throwing his monitor in a fit of rage, though it did not go far. I pulled another monitor around to my drone station and watched the hopelessly outmatched pair. For a moment, I thought I made out a movement on the ground. Then I saw Thor drop his hatchet and reach down. There seemed to be a large battle axe just laying on the ground. How was he getting things just made for him? The shield grew rapidly out of the ground, seeming to be made of a ceramic that was both tough to blows and highly resistant to heat. Now he has a 3 FT-long battle axe that his ancestors would have been proud of. The dragon was weary now, and the still hopelessly outmatched pair were working their way sideways to flank the creature. The creature turned to face Thor and swung its mighty whip-like tail at Jarl. The tail cracked as it went through the air, and Jarl ducked under it, slashing as it went by. The dragon surged forward, keeping its head low, ready to strike like a snake. It surged forward to snap at Thor, who rolled to the side, and then the creature burst forward, arching its neck and bringing its forward paws into action. It swiped at Thor as he came out of the roll, and just barely missed due to a deft movement by Thor. But the beast was ready to miss this time, and backhanded the blonde warrior into the underbrush. It rapidly snapped around, and Jarl stood his ground. It swiped, Jarl sidestepped, and the beast pushed forward again. Whereas Thor was a beautiful combination of graceful power, exceptional speed, and limitless endurance, Jarl was simply graceful and quick. He avoided a second blow, but was fighting a losing battle. A rock rolled under his foot, and the dragon sent him tumbling. The dragon bellowed with pleasure as it reached out with its long neck to devour its prey. A whistle pierced the air, and the long, serpentine dragon began fending off an assailant. The attacker was much smaller, yet still enormous compared to Jarl and Thor. All I could discern from the rising dust cloud was a tangle of scales, snarls, and claws. The larger dragon's hue was not the shimmering sheen of before, but a matte gray. With a bellowing roar, the larger beast retreated, and the smaller creature chased it for a distance before returning towards the brush where Thor had tumbled. Thor emerged, readying himself for battle once more, but the dragon knelt on one forelimb and spread its wings, bowing its head. Mr. Thor Bartholomew Stein. Greetings, my name is Dora, member of the Mountain Thunder, warrior of the Forsaken Valley, in which you currently stand, the dragon said in a deep, stately manner. Thor stammered, asking how the dragon knew his name, to which Dora chuckled. I know many things, even as a young warrior. However, all of our people are taught your name, for you created us, and we will keep your name immortal for the gift of life you have given us. Jarl's bellowing cry of, "Halt thine attacks upon my fearsome friend!" rang out from the background. Dora looked around, and with a swipe of his tail, knocked the sword from Jarl's hand, then pinned him to the ground. Unhand me, foul creature! You shall not show me disrespect. The Tyrrek warrior sounded annoyed. Thor shrugged. You are a cowardly beast, only lucky to have caught me unawares. Dora looked around at the Jarl, holding him on the ground with his tail. He appears tasty, and he is vexing. May I consume him? He asked. No, you cannot simply eat people because they are vexing, Thor replied. Could have fooled me. The last irritating creature was scarcely a mouthful. This one would provide more. Cease speculating on how many bites he will require. No, you may not eat him, Thor said firmly. You could certainly pilot it. What was your purpose in needing it? Thor said he required the chest beneath his bed. I am inclined to not retrieve it for him. That would be unwise. I know him better than you do. If he requests that chest, you should retrieve it for him. Could you lend me some fab bots then? It's too heavy for me to carry or for anyone else to move. Yes, I've just dispatched them. They'll arrive in a few moments. Now leave me be. I must work miracles. Marshall donned the gloves from his back pocket, powered them up, and adjusted his smart glasses. Then the work began. Hundreds of fabbies, or bots designed to assist him, began to move as one, with Marshall as their guiding mind. His hands flickered through the air, and the small bots acted. They descended upon the shuttle with plasma cutters, welders, and spare hull sections. As quickly as the fabbies sliced away the jaggedly ripped sections, other bots came in and removed the damaged brackets for the 4 small drive cores located on the outside, rear of the ship. I departed the Concerto de Mechanica, even though it was a performance by a master. I had other matters to attend to. The bots had already transported the chest to the second shuttle. I gazed upon its dull gray exterior, wondering what it contained. There wasn't even a seam in its construction. The only feature was a keypad with 10 digits. I ignored it as I climbed into the cockpit. As I began the warm-up sequence, Marshall came over the radio. Would you kindly refrain from damaging that one? Your Tyrrek pilot's shuttle has been shot down over the sea. What? How? I don't know. With missiles, if I had to guess. Okay, who did it? There isn't supposed to be anyone here. They call it an uninhabited planet for a reason, Marshall. Well, perhaps it's not as uninhabited as you once thought.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.